In the early days of 1939, Europe appeared to be a continent like any other on the surface. People went to work, cafes filled up in city squares, and newspapers still reported on art exhibitions and football matches. Yet behind this everyday life, the shadow of a great catastrophe that had occurred 20 years earlier lingered silently. The First World War had not only torn millions of people from life, but also changed an entire generation's view of the world forever. Fathers had not returned. Cities had been reduced to rubble, and this trauma had become central to the stories children heard as they grew up. That is why people clung tightly to peace. The idea of another war was not only frightening, but almost inconceivable to the average European. However, the decisions made in the capitals had long since surpassed this emotional reality. For political leaders, peace was no longer a value to be protected, but a temporary state. Europe was, unknowingly, taking a deep breath and moving toward one of the most destructive periods in history. Germany was at the center of this silent tension. Throughout the 1930s, the country had been trying to erase the sense of humiliation caused by losing a war. Economic crises, unemployment, and social unrest had led the people to seek stronger leadership. Over time, this search became not just a political preference, but almost a national identity. People were reminded of the pains of the past and told that the future could only be built through strength. Germany's rearmament during this period was not merely a military preparation. It was a mental transformation that encompassed the entire society. The history taught in schools, the headlines in newspapers, and the conversations on the streets reinforced the same idea. Germany should no longer be a defeated nation, but one that was rising again. Neighboring countries observed this change, but could not openly oppose it, because everyone knew the price of a new conflict all too well. From the mid-1930s onwards, the changes taking place in Germany could have been perceived from the outside as merely an economic recovery. Yet internally, a much deeper transformation was underway. The people had not forgotten the losses of the past, but they were beginning to see these losses not as a warning, but as a call for revenge. The new generation had not seen the true face of war. For them, the conflict was nothing more than the dramatic stories told by their elders. This led to the romanticization of war. The slogans rising in the streets, the marches playing on the radio, and the language of the newspapers were driving people into an increasingly harsh state of mind. Peace was no longer seen as a value worth defending. It was beginning to be portrayed as an obstacle to gaining power. Other European countries were observing this change, but did not yet perceive a concrete threat. Because no one really wanted to accept that a new war was imminent. By 1939, no diplomatic effort had the power to stop the approaching storm. The final talks held in European capitals had become attempts to delay the inevitable rather than efforts to save peace. Newspapers still spoke of agreements and possibilities for compromise, but military preparations had long since rendered these words meaningless. Germany's gaze turned eastward signified not just the targeting of one country, but the questioning of the entire European order. For Poland, this process turned into increasing isolation. The assurances given by the great powers remained on paper, while the reality on the ground painted an increasingly bleak picture. The buildup of German troops at the border could no longer be concealed. Ordinary people listened anxiously to the news on the radio, and there was unusual activity at train stations. And finally, the long-awaited moment arrived. Germany's first step eastward was not merely a border violation, it marked the end of an era. When Europe awoke one morning, it realized it was now living in a different world. This was a moment that changed not only Poland's fate, but that of the entire continent. By the final months of 1939, Europe was no longer the Europe of old. Cities where life had once thrived in its streets had now become places dominated by uncertainty and fear. People still went to work, children still went to school. But every day they woke up with the same question: would everything remain the same tomorrow? The war was much more than a formally declared state of affairs. It was now felt in people's eyes, in the caution of their conversations, and in the silence that fell as they listened to the evening news on the radio. Even if no one said it aloud, everyone knew the same truth. Europe had once again walked toward disaster with its own hands. This final scene represents not only a period when armies faced each other, but also the moment when a continent slowly lost its hopes. 1939 will go down in history books as a starting date, but for those who lived through that year, it was the end of an era. Peace had given way to an irreversible uncertainty, and now no one knew where this path would lead.